Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical on YouTube at Stillman & Co. And again, like and subscribe. Tell all your friends on this just ugly, ugly Thursday here in Nashville, Tennessee. It is not very pretty. And our numbers yesterday, our streaming numbers, our YouTube numbers, they were not pretty yesterday, which is why you got to tell all your friends, like and subscribe. They were not pretty yesterday, and I'm thinking it's because Titans fans are tired of me saying that Cam Ward's not going to be that good. And all I'll have to say is there are so many people out there that are like, you're just doing this for clicks, that it's like, no. If all I cared about were clicks, if I was just doing this for clicks, then I would tell you the opposite. I would tell you every day that Cam Ward is awesome and that this is a terrible football team and that this has nothing to do with Cam Ward and that Cam Ward is going to be the next Mahomes and that look at that one throw to Chig. He's awesome. And I would do the Cam Ward celebration and I'd talk about how Xavier Restrepo is the missing link and all the bullshit that everybody else says, trying to convince themselves that a quarterback who was not ranked very highly going into the draft was overdrafted by the team and is now showing us that he's not that good and has issues in his game that they need to correct. Is not that good, and you've set your franchise back. Fans don't want to hear that. Fans want to be optimistic. And so, again, if you want to be optimistic, that's on you. If you want the truth, this is the show for you, where we are going to introduce something new. Because the Titans fan base, I mean, they keep trying to tell themselves every which way that Cam Ward is not part of the problem. Now, I will say Cam Ward is not the problem with this football team. The problem with this football team is above Cam Ward. Cam Ward is a symptom. He was an overdrafted quarterback that a front office that was completely inexperienced, that was hired by a moron, decided to overdraft in spite of his flaws to put him on a terrible team with a coach who sucked, who again was hired by a moron. And that's why you are where you are. That's why you're 1-9. It's not Cam's fault. But every day we are going to do this from now on whenever I feel like Twitter has decided there is another reason for why Cam Ward is not any good, and it's going to be this.
The Cam Ward excuse of the day.
Okay, so we're going to have that throughout the program. But if you want to be optimistic, if you want to be hopeful, if you want to let's get to Matt Miller at ESPN, one of their 18 draft analysts that work with Mel Kiper Jr. He's got a mock draft out at ESPN.com. And Lord have mercy, is it embarrassing to be talking mock drafts before Thanksgiving. But that is the state of this sorry-ass franchise, and that's where we'll go. And Matt Miller does have the Titans making a trade at the top of the draft. According to Matt Miller at ESPN, the Titans, he writes, quote, armed with 2 first-round picks and an additional second-round pick in 2026, thanks to the deadline trades of cornerback Sauce Gardner and defensive tackle Quentin Williams, the Jets are moving up to Tennessee's spot at number 1 in this mock draft. Since the Titans used their 2025 number 1 pick on quarterback Cam Ward, they could be convinced to move down and accumulate draft capital to build around their young quarterback. In this deal, the Jets would send both of their first-round picks, number 4 and number 28, and their 2027 second-round pick to the Titans for the top selection. So according to this mock draft, Tennessee trades the first overall pick to the Jets for the 4th overall pick, the 28th overall pick, and a second rounder in next year's draft. Before we get into the names that Matt Miller puts out there as the guys that he sees the Titans picking, I cannot let this slide. That is a horrendous trade. I mean, just horrible. If you end up with the number 1 pick in the draft and the best you can get is the 4th pick, the 28th pick, and a second next year, you need to be fired. At that point, just take the best player because you don't need to undersell that pick that badly. So first things first, the trade that Matt Miller proposes absolutely stinks. A trade for me with the Jets would be for 28, their second rounder this year, which right now is going to be 36. So now all of a sudden I just have 5 picks now, or excuse me, I have 4 picks in this year's top 100. Or no, I have my 3rd round pick. I have 4 picks in this year's top 2 rounds, which is what I want. And I want their lowest 2027 first. So that would be whichever one is the worst. Indianapolis's, Dallas's, yours. I want the worst one. So that could be 16, that could be 22, that could be 32. Technically, I guess that could be 3. If the Jets finished worst and the Indy was second worst and Dallas was third, then I get the worst pick. Now, the picks that Matt Miller says the Titans need to make. Matt Miller has the Titans taking Jordyn Tyson, the wide receiver out of Arizona State, with the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft. In fact, I don't think that was dramatic enough. Let's get a little drum roll here. Okay, Matt Miller has Jordyn Tyson, the wide receiver out of Arizona State, at 4. And then, because again, the Titans have the 28th pick, that would come from Indianapolis in exchange for the trade with Sauce Gardner. The Titans would be back on the clock at number 28. First of all, 28 is really not that good of a pick. You know, if you were to walk out and you were to say 2 first-rounders and the draft trade chart does not like the 28th overall pick. That's why I don't crap on the Isaiah Wilson pick as much as I crap on the Corey Davis pick, because I think there's a massive difference between the 5th pick and the 28th pick. The 28th pick has a value of 660. The 4th overall pick has a value of 1,800. So it's more than double the value. So they're not all the same. But with the 28th pick in the draft, Matt Miller has the Titans taking Colton Hood, a corner out of Tennessee. So my reaction when I clicked that, again, not knowing who's really who in the draft other than about the top 5 or 6 names, my initial reaction to that was, I hate it. And here's why I hate it. Because when it comes to Jordyn Tyson, who most people consider to be the top wide receiver on the board, I have to ask, is he the best player in this class? Is he better than Ruben Bain, the pass rusher out of Miami? Is he better than Avril Reese, the inside backer who most people think can be like a Micah Parsons or an Abdul Carter and move outside from Ohio State? And most people would say no. And so then when I look at the Jordyn Tyson pick, because again, I haven't scouted these guys, but I remember talking to Braden Gall about this a couple weeks ago. And Braden Gall, who has scouted it, is like, Jordyn Tyson is the top receiver in this draft, but the difference between Jordyn Tyson and Chris Bell and Carnell Tate, and it's really not that big of a gap. So you're telling me that this receiver is not a superstar receiver. You're telling me this is not Calvin Johnson coming out of Georgia Tech. This is not Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors from a couple of years ago. This is a first-round wide receiver. And Matt Miller's whole reasoning for why they would take Jordyn Tyson ahead of Ruben Bain and ahead of others is because, well, they need a receiver for Cam Ward. And most people probably see top receiver in the class. They need a receiver for Cam Ward. Go ahead and pick the receiver. And I just want you guys to know, just taking whatever trade you can get, which is what this looks like, because the value of this trade is not very good. Just taking whatever trade you can get and then overdrafting the receiver ahead of the pass rushers who people say are better is a recipe for disaster. That is very dangerous. Do you people remember the last time the Titans drafted a receiver in the top 5? Because, well, we need a receiver. Like, we have to get a receiver, Jared. I do. And look at the players the Titans didn't take in that 2017 draft because they had to take a wide receiver. Now, I say all of this because Corey Davis did give them 4 years of solid number 2 wide receiver work. But if that's what Jordyn Tyson becomes, that's not going to be good enough. You need a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. So when it comes to Jordyn Tyson, I ask people, how good is he? What's his NFL comp? I've seen comps for Jerry Jeudy. That's not good enough. When we talk about, hey, we got to get Cam Ward, a big-time receiver, we're not talking about Jerry Jeudy. At least I hope we're not. Is it the kind of wide receiver that you can't traditionally get in free agency? Is it the kind of wide receiver that you can't get later in the draft? Again, the top of the second round every year seems to have a bunch of draftable receivers. T. Higgins, top of the second round. A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, those guys, second round. DK Metcalf, second round of the draft. Alec Pierce, who's a free agent, second round of the draft. Even some of the guys that are playing really well right now, Franklin for the Broncos, second round of the draft. Ladd McConkey for the Chargers, second round of the draft. So is Jordyn Tyson that much better than those guys? Or is it, well, we need a receiver, so we just have to go take a receiver? And again, what's the comp between Jordyn Tyson, who's the best receiver in this class, and say Ruben Bain, who Sam Brookhouse from Sumer Sports came on the show last week, and he said he thinks he's going to be Terrell Suggs. Terrell Suggs was a high-end pass rusher for like 15 years in the NFL. I'll take that. And the problem I think that's going to show itself here when it comes to the Titans and the draft and trying to fix the team and trying to get a good trade and trying everything else is that the best deals, and I think this is also in life, by the way, the best deals usually happen a year out. For example, the Titans got the 5th pick in the 2017 draft in a deal with the Rams that they made in 2016. The Titans, if the season ended today and had made the Cam Ward Giants trade last year, would have the 1st pick. They'd have the 2nd pick from the Giants because apparently the Giants right now own the 2nd pick in the NFL draft, plus the Giants 2nd rounder last year, who I believe kicked your ass on Sunday, that slot pick. You wouldn't have had to trade the 35th pick to get more picks. And you'd have their 2nd rounder this year. So last year they said, no, forget the deal. We're going to go with the team need here. We're going to take the quarterback. Now you're going to have to make a deal. And the deals aren't going to be as good for what you're going to get until you start dealing with next year. That's where the good trades happen. So here's what needs to happen for the Titans in order to really be able to rebuild the team, to really use this offseason to make actual progress. I do think it is hilarious to me when it comes to how bad the Titans are. Everybody just shrugs their shoulders in defense of Cam Ward. Again, when it comes to the
Cam Ward excuse of the day.
So everybody just shrugs their shoulders and they just say, oh, no, that's because of the bad roster and nobody could be any good on this team and there's no way that, and I'm like, you do realize that this team could have improved some between last year and this year. They haven't, which tells you that they wasted an entire offseason. In fact, they're actually worse, but they could, in theory, improve their football team a little bit. Apparently, they don't have to improve their football team, but they could have improved their football team. And so, again, when it comes to actually improving your football team for this season, or I should say for this upcoming season, for next year, since we've already turned the page on this year, here's what needs to happen. Number one, the Titans need to get the number 1 pick. Yes, they might be able to get a haul for number 2. But if you don't get number 1, you don't control the board. Last year, an example of a team that went into the last week of the season with the number 1 pick in the draft in tow, played their backup quarterback, beat the Buffalo Bills in the last week of the year, and ended up picking 4th. And New England sat there at 4 trying to get out of the pick. They did not want to take, with the 4th pick, the short-arm tackle out of LSU. They wanted more picks. Nobody wanted to trade. And so they sat there and they took the tackle. Now, it's worked out for them, but that doesn't mean that that's what they wanted to do. So you absolutely have to lose the rest of these games. You cannot end up with the number 3 or number 4 pick in this year's draft. And again, I keep going back to examples. Last year, the Giants won a game they had no business winning against Indianapolis, and that cost them the number 1 pick. And they tried desperately to get up from number 3 to number 1. So for everything that needs to happen, you have to control the board. The Titans need the number 1 pick, period. That's first thing. Number 2, the Titans need Dante Moore to go back to Oregon. Because what that does is, and by the way, let me just say this. I have heard through the grapevine, for whatever you want to, I have heard that Dante Moore is going back to Oregon. But here's why they need Dante Moore to go back to Oregon, or to clearly separate himself as the number 1 quarterback in this draft. It seems like Ty Simpson, Fernando Mendoza, and Dante Moore are the top of the first-round quarterbacks in this class. Nobody looks at them like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, or Drake May, but they look at them more like Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. If Dante Moore goes back to Oregon, then the supply of quarterbacks goes down, and the Titans, with the first pick, increase their ability of a trade because demand is still very strong. We know the Raiders need a quarterback in the draft. We know the Browns want a quarterback in the draft. We know the Jets want a quarterback in the draft. Basically, every bad team, Arizona is probably going to want a quarterback in the draft. Every bad team, with the exception of the Giants and the Titans, are going to be looking for quarterbacks in the draft. And maybe the Titans should be looking. I kid, kind of. Number 3, the Titans need to align everything this offseason and really focus on getting the team better. And that includes the draft board, the free agency pool, and they need to factor in trades too. They need to kick a lot of tires this offseason about working out trades, and they need to be willing to spend on the roster. And I mean spend. Because what you need to do is you need to be able to look at the wide receiver market according to the draft board and the wide receiver market according to free agency, and you need to decide, do we have to draft Jordyn Tyson very highly in this year's draft, or is he going to project more as the number 2 anyways, so we can just sign Alec Pierce, or we can sign Romeo Doubs from the Green Bay Packers, and it's not going to be a number 1 receiver, but it'll be a number 2 receiver. And then we take Avril Reese because there's not an Avril Reese or there's not a Reuben Bain sitting there in free agency. You're going to have to line all that up. This can't be like last year where it's just like, we're going to take the quarterback and we're going to do nothing at wide receiver until day 3 of the draft, and we're going to do nothing at edge rusher until the end of the second round, and we're going to cut our leading sacker because fuck it, he ain't that good anyways, and we're just going to go for it. I don't think you can be doing that. I mean, I'll just tell you right now, I don't think it works like that. And then finally, here is something the Titans are going to have to do. And I know they spent this entire offseason saying that it doesn't work because it didn't work for them 2 years ago. But the Titans are going to have to sign guys in free agency who can play right away and be good. Because right now, they got a lot of holes, and they're going to need a tight end. They're going to need defensive backs. They're going to need a bell cow running back. They probably are going to need a veteran receiver. They're going to need a pass rusher. Again, look at what the Patriots did this offseason. I know everybody thinks that the great Mike Vrabel came in there with his magic testosterone juice and just sprinkled fairy dust all over the organization, and Drake May has become Tom Brady 2.0. But that's not what really happened. Because when this team was being cheap as shit and signing Andre Dillard, they sucked, even with the great Mike Vrabel as the coach. The Patriots spent. They went out and added to the defensive line Milton Williams, top of the market contract. They went out and added an outside linebacker in Harold Landry, who has played fairly similarly to what he played here, which again is your best sacker. They spent on a right tackle, Morgan Moses. They spent on Stephon Diggs at wide receiver. They went out inside backer, corner, Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis. You have to do something similar. You are not likely to get your star players via free agency, but you need your starting players to come in here via free agency. And you're going to have to pay the you suck tax, which is what, 5% extra? 10% extra? So for the Titans to do something similar to what they're going to have to do, and that's assuming they get the number 1 pick and can trade out of it, because if they get the number 3 pick and Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson are off the board, you may not be able to move out of that. So if you're able to move out, then you can target, okay, here's who we want at the top of the draft. You can target a guy. You cannot target a guy if you're making the deal like Matt Miller had at ESPN, where you're getting the 28th pick as part of the, you can target a position saying, we know it'll be deep at receiver, or we know it'll be deep at guard, or we know it'll be deep at defensive tackle or corner or whatever. But when it comes to making those choices, you can say, all right, we're going to draft Reuben Bain. The same way the Patriots said, okay, we're going to draft Will Campbell, and Will Campbell's going to play left tackle. Well, this is what you would have to do in free agency. And this is just the beginning, because you still need depth pieces to go with kind of the starting core players you're adding. I looked it up today and I said, okay, if I'm the Titans and I'm putting together the free agency board and I'm trying to say, all right, who do we want to go out there and get? And let me remind you all that when you want a certain player, you have to pay an added market price. So if there's 8 receivers out there, and I think receiver is a good example of this, because there's Romeo Doubs, there's Alec Pierce, there's Jacoby Myers. There'll be a handful of guys that get cut. They're probably all about the same. If you want one of those guys, you can set your price at $13 million and get one of those guys probably at that price. But if you want that guy, like let's say you love Romeo Doubs, which I don't, but let's say you do. You love Romeo Doubs, then you have to overpay to get the guy you want, which takes me back to free agency. I looked at who's a potential free agent this year, and I mean good ones. I'm not talking about Khalil Mack, who is a solid player still, but is an old pawpaw, because, again, what's signing an old pawpaw going to do for you? And there were 4 guys I'm like, you're probably going to have to pay him. Number 1, Breece Hall, running back of the Jets. He's going to be by far the top running back on the market. By far. There are going to be a bunch of suitors for Breece Hall. And Spot Track thinks he's about worth $10 million a year. So if you want Breece Hall, you're probably looking at, and I think I'm being conservative with this, $11 million for an AAV on a 4-year contract in which 2+ is guaranteed. So Breece Hall, that's going to cost you $11 million. And remember, you pay more money in the first year because you pay the signing bonus. Number 2, Isaiah Likely, the tight end in Baltimore. I think if you want him, and there's going to be a lot of suitors for Isaiah Likely, if you want him, it's going to be 4 years, $12.5 million AAV. Probably more than that. maybe in the 15 range. I mean, there are deals where I've done the free agency thing. We always do our free agency plan the day before free agency opens. And I sit back and I'm like, okay, let's say you want to sign Isaiah Likely, and I put the number at $12.5 million, assuming that his market value is somewhere around 10. You have to pay the suck tax. There's going to be other suitors out there. So let's say 12.5. And then before free agency opens, another guy will sign, and I'm like, oh no, if I thought Isaiah Likely was 12.5, it's probably going to be more towards 15. But again, if you target Isaiah Likely, you go to the combine, you talk to his agents, you say, we want Isaiah Likely. His agents are going to give you a ridiculous number, and they're going to take it back to the other teams they're negotiating with too. But let's try to project here. I'll say $12.5 million for Isaiah Likely. I say these numbers, and as I'm saying them, and I wrote them down this morning, I'm thinking it's more expensive, but fine. $11 million a year for Breece Hall in a 4-year deal, 2+ guaranteed. Isaiah Likely, $12.5 million on a 4-year deal. Then you need a defensive back. You don't have any corners. You're going to get rid of L'Jarius Sneed. That'll open up some money. Alontae Taylor is the top corner that's going to hit the market this year. Alontae Taylor, I'm thinking 3 years, $20 million AAV. So now I just paid a corner. And Alontae Taylor's a good player. I don't think anybody would tell you that Alontae Taylor is a great player. So now I'm paying Alontae Taylor $20 million because I have to get a starting caliber corner. And then you need a receiver. I don't know what they're going to do with Calvin Ridley. Everybody seems to assume they're going to get rid of Calvin Ridley. I don't know that. But, well, you need to pay Jacoby Myers. Not going to want to overpay Alec Pierce. You're not going to want to overpay Romeo Doubs. So go get the dented can, Jacoby Myers, probably 2 years, $10 million a season, maybe $12 million a season. So right there, those 4 guys, if I ask you, are the Titans a Breece Hall, Isaiah Likely, Alontae Taylor, and Jacoby Myers away from competing? What would you say? Because I just spent $174 million. And you still need 2 starting corners, a starting right guard, a true number 1 wide receiver, and a true number 1 edge rusher. Draft Ruben Bain, draft Avril Reese. Now you just need a true number 1 wide receiver. So if you're going to do this the right way, like if you're actually going to build this football team and try to win some football games and not just say stupid shit like draft, develop, retain. And if you actually think Cam Ward would do a lot better with a much better team around him, that's what it's going to take to get a better team. You are going to have to spend a buttload of money in free agency this year. You are going to have to get the number 1 pick so you can trade back and get more picks so that, again, these things are dartboard shots. Some of them, again, you're picking number 2 and there's a great player there. There's Calvin Johnson there. That's a little different than drafting a receiver in the 4th round and hoping that they become Amon-Ra St. Brown, which usually doesn't happen. And there's a lot of variables that go into this and a lot of hard work and a lot of things that make me nervous. So I know a lot of people have already given up on this season. And I know there are a lot of Titan fans out there that only want to hear positive. That there are a lot of Titan fans out there that don't want to hear me tell you that I don't think Cam Ward's very good, even though I told you in March I didn't think Cam Ward was very good. I told you in April I didn't think Cam Ward was very good. They drafted Cam Ward. Then we got to May, and we heard what the Giants offered, and I couldn't believe that they turned that down. Then we got to the OTAs, and he was throwing interceptions, and I said, I don't like a quarterback who's shrugging off his interceptions. There was no real competition for him. They weren't going to bring him along slowly. There was no real plan for Cam Ward, even though they said there was a plan. There's no plan. Then he starts throwing interceptions in training camp, and I'm saying, oh, my God, I went to one practice. He looked like Blake Bortles, and everyone's like, it's just practice. Now he plays every week. He's terrible, and there's all these excuses. So if you think Cam Ward is the guy and that they have to build a team around Cam Ward, That's what it's going to take to do it. And the distinguished gentleman says, you don't have to get the top of the market players at every position. So you want to go for the second best player? You want to go for the third best player? Because when you get to free agency, the best free agent corner, Alontae Taylor, is what in terms of his rank as a corner in the NFL? 19th? So you don't want me to pay top of the market for the 19th best corner. You want me to pay a little bit less for the 30th best corner. What are we doing? You've tried that. You've tried that in multiple years where you've said, oh, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Let's just go get Draymond Jones. It doesn't work. You need impact players. That's what the Patriots did. The Patriots went out and signed a couple of impact players. That is what I'm telling you you need. Okay. There is a coach that I feel like we've talked about, but I do feel like a lot of people are dismissing, and maybe even me. And maybe we should reevaluate it. And we'll get to that here in just a second. First, I'm going to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They are the proud presenting sponsor of this program. They've been in business since 1990, and they are family-owned and operated. With 100% satisfaction, if happy you'll be, the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work that is performed by Hiller, they will make it right. Learn more by visiting happyhiller.com. I use Hiller at my home. I absolutely love them. They do a great job. They take great care. Everything professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians who come into your home and they leave it clean and better than they found it. Again, I know this because I use Hiller at my home. They are proud supporters of the Nashville Predators, the Tennessee Volunteers, and the Vanderbilt Commodores. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Okay. We need to have a talk about Arthur Smith. If I may. Because I know 2020 was a long time ago. By the way, I think I just hit the mute button there, but I don't think I did, so I'm sorry about that. 2020 is a long time ago, and that's when Arthur was your offensive coordinator. I don't know who the coach of this team is going to be. I believe that Matt Nagy is the odds-on favorite, and I will be shocked if they don't hire Matt Nagy for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think the Titans are going to want to make it look like Mike Borgonzi's in charge of the team, and so you let Mike Borgonzi hire the coach. The same way that they let Ran Carthon hire the last coach because they wanted people to know that Ran Carthon was in charge of the team, and that's why Chad Brinker's not getting any of the blame, even though he technically was president of football operations and part of the hiring committee that hired Brian Callahan. And even though you don't want to hear this now, you will be saying this, you people will be saying this when the time comes, that he was instrumental in the development of Mahomes. And you'll hope that he can be instrumental in the development of Ward. So I think it's going to be Matt Nagy. But the reason I want to bring up Arthur Smith is because I think we need to have a discussion of what's going on in Atlanta. Arthur Smith is a candidate for the Tennessee Titans job. I heard Jay Glazer, and I think Jay Glazer, when it comes to sourcing, I think he and Albert Breer are two of the best sourced reporters in the NFL ecosphere. The problem is that sometimes these guys got to pat some agents on the tush just to get some more information, so you don't exactly know what they're reporting or who they're reporting or who's getting them to report or whatever. But Jay Glazer was talking about the Giants job on Fox on Sunday, and he mentioned all of the same candidates we're talking about now. Matt Nagy and Arthur Smith, and he brought up Steve Spagnuolo, and there are going to be roughly 7 openings this year. Tennessee and the Giants are already open. Arizona probably comes open. Cincinnati probably comes open. I think we need to highlight Atlanta because they might come open too. That's 5. Then there are wild cards with bad teams that fire their coaches all the time, like Las Vegas with Pete Carroll, where it doesn't feel like Pete's the long-term solution, and it doesn't feel like Pete's getting a lot done in the short term. There's Cleveland, where Kevin Stefanski has been there for forever, and who knows what they're going to do. And then every year there's a surprise firing that comes out where you're like, oh my God, they fired who? So I think there's still going to be roughly 7 jobs. And there's not really a slam dunk candidate in this cycle. Think about all the guys that we've talked about. Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel. Are those guys slam dunks? Mike McCarthy, Doug Peterson. There is not a Mike Vrabel in this cycle. There is not a Jim Harbaugh, who just won a national title in college, who is going to jump to the NFL because he has to. This hiring cycle is really the hiring cycle of the retreads. The good teams, with a lot of their coordinators, are either new, like the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, or they're old defensive coordinators like Vic Fangio and Steve Spagnuolo. Again, Kansas City's offensive coordinator's Matt Nagy. He's already been a coach. And that's what takes me to Atlanta. When Arthur Smith went to Atlanta, they were rebuilding without knowing that they were rebuilding. The Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Super Bowl letdown, Dan Quinn, Thomas Dimitrov, that era was over. And the Falcons didn't totally want to admit it. The Falcons chased that 2016 team for 4 years. And finally, they moved on from the coach, and they moved on from the general manager, and then they moved on from Julio, but they didn't move on from Matt Ryan. And Arthur went 7-9. That was his first year. That was a rebuilding year. Then they chased after Deshaun Watson and pissed off Matt Ryan, which left Arthur scrambling for a quarterback. So he ends up signing Marcus Mariota, and they drafted Desmond Ridder in a bad quarterback draft and rolled with Desmond Ridder. Now, I don't know why they rolled with Desmond Ridder in 2023 with no insurance plan. On my quarterback carousel, I kept having Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield go to the Falcons as kind of that backup plus. Because I'm like, if Ritter's not any good, you will probably want to turn it over to Darnold or turn it over to Baker and try to win some games. And instead, they had Taylor Heineke. And with 3 years of Matt Ryan and a rebuild that's not technically a rebuild, Mariota after we pissed off Matt Ryan, and Desmond Ridder, Atlanta was 7-10, 7-10, 7-10, and that's good for a 4-1-2 win percentage. Arthur got fired. Terry Fontenot, the general manager of the Falcons, did not. The story at the time, the narrative, and remember, these narratives are very, very important. Remember, with Mike Vrabel, it's always about how great the narrative is that the great Mike Vrabel invented the Tennessee Titans, and everybody who didn't win with the Tennessee Titans was holding Mike Vrabel back, including the owner, both general managers, all the assistant coaches, everybody else was holding the great Mike Vrabel back, and people bought it because that's how narratives work. The narrative with Mike McCarthy is that he's fat and stupid, even though he did win a Super Bowl in Green Bay, and he did perform probably as expected over time in Dallas. But again, let's go back to the narrative surrounding Arthur Smith in Atlanta. The narrative was Arthur doesn't get those great playmakers the ball. Yes, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. What is Arthur Smith doing? Now that Raheem Morris has been the head coach in Atlanta with a $100 million quarterback in Kirk Cousins and the 8th overall draft choice in Michael Penix, and the Falcons have gone 15-23, which is less than Arthur's win percentage of 412 at 395, I have to ask, was it an Arthur issue or was it an Atlanta issue? Arthur Smith was winning more in Atlanta than Raheem Morris is winning with a $100 million quarterback and the 8th overall pick when Arthur was rolling out Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. I heard Kaharski this morning criticize Arthur Smith for not getting his playmakers the ball enough, which again was the narrative in Atlanta. whether it was Bijan Robinson or Kyle Pitts or DK Metcalf now in Pittsburgh. But we all watched Arthur Smith for 2 years as the offensive coordinator of the Titans. It's not like Arthur struggled to get Derrick Henry the ball or Arthur struggled to get A.J. Brown the ball. So, again, is it an Arthur issue or is it an Atlanta issue and an Aaron Rodgers is 50 years old issue? And then I also want to know, how much influence did Arthur Smith have in Atlanta? Was it Arthur who pushed the organization to draft Kyle Pitts at number 4 when Jamar Chase went at number 5? Or was that Terry Fontenot and Rich McKay? We don't know. Was it Arthur that was sold on Desmond Ridder in 2023 and said, we don't need a real backup, we're good with Taylor Heineke? Or was that Terry Fontenot and Rich McKay? And the one thing I'm going to say about Arthur Smith is that Atlanta's impending collapse, and they will be giving the Rams a top 10 pick in next year's draft because of it, seems to reek of an organization that does not have a clue. And that has to at least somewhat vindicate Arthur Smith, does it not? And when it comes to head coaches, and it comes to guys that you really are going to invest in and believe in, all of these leadership things, temperament, it really stems for 3 issues that you try to figure out when it comes to hiring a head coach. Number 1, are you smart enough to be a head coach? Number 2, are you self-aware enough to become a head coach in the NFL? And number 3, can you work well enough with others and coach the guys that somebody else gives you? That's really what matters. Everything else is all just things people talk about on TV and, well, the scheme. The scheme is so important. And Brian Callahan's scheme is the same as Clint Kubiak's, who you're going to play this week in Seattle. Their offenses look nothing alike. Now, sometimes you can be a moron and win some games because you got a good team. But for the most part, I think it is, are you smart enough to be head coach? Are you self-aware enough to be head coach? And can you deal with coaching somebody else's players? That's what it really boils down to. That's like hosting a show, hosting a radio program. I always said to people, I think you need 3 things. And I took this from Mad Dog Russo, but it's true. You need to be knowledgeable, you need to have a personality, and you need to know how to run a radio program. And I'd like to think that I'm knowledgeable, have a personality, and know how to run a program. And a lot of people don't. And so I use Brian Callahan as an example. They didn't know Brian Callahan. So they didn't know that he was a complete fucking moron and would say shit like, well, Will Levis is everything you want in a franchise quarterback. Or that he wouldn't know the rules. Or that every press conference with him was a foot in the mouth. They didn't know that because they didn't know him. We know Arthur. We know Arthur Smith is not incompetent. Like, even if you are somebody who is anti-hiring Arthur Smith, and you're entitled to your opinion, you know from watching Arthur Smith with the Tennessee Titans that Arthur Smith is not an incompetent coach. And he's not an incompetent guy. And the other thing we don't know is that the Titans seem to always play musical philosophies, where on Monday their philosophy is collaboration. On Tuesday, their philosophy is the great Chad Brinker. And on Wednesday, it's draft, develop, retain. So they're always changing what it is they're looking for. But the one thing with Titans ownership is they know Arthur. And Arthur is also like them. He's rich. So are they. The best offense they've ever had was with Arthur Smith pushing the buttons. And that, by the way, is not a subjective narrative summarization. No, the highest ranked offense you ever had was number 2 in 2020, and Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator, and he called the plays. We know it wasn't Mike Vrabel calling the plays on offense. Titans ownership knows Arthur. He's like them. The best offense they ever had. Arthur was pushing the buttons. They hate Mike Vrabel. They think Mike Vrabel's overrated. So if you think Mike Vrabel's overrated, don't you think Arthur might be underrated? And a lot of the times when you're thinking about an organization hiring a coach, because the owner knows somebody that used to be there, it oftentimes is kind of a shrug like, oh yeah, they're going to hire Arthur Smith. In fact, wouldn't it have made sense if they had hired Arthur Smith after Arthur got fired in 2023 in Atlanta? But at the time, musical philosophies let Rand cook. They didn't even interview him. They were going to go hire, the philosophy was, go hire one of the gurus from the Shanahan-McVay tree and stick him in there and give him the headset and make him turn Will Levis into Dan Marino. Well, now we don't have that philosophy anymore. Now the philosophy is, we want somebody who's a real coach. Again, you know and I know, Arthur is a real coach. He may not be the best coach, but he is a real coach. And this isn't something that never happens around the NFL. Who did New England hire to be their coach? The guy the owner knew. Tampa Bay hired their defensive coordinator, whom they knew, to be their head coach. They didn't sit there and say, well, Todd Bowles sucked with the Jets. No, they knew him. Houston hired a guy they knew in DeMeco Ryans to be the coach. Now, the Jets have hired a guy they know in Aaron Glenn, and right now it's not working out. But when it comes to the owner, hiring somebody that they know, because instead of, hey, it's one day to sit down with a coach and let me see if this guy is competent, this guy knows the NFL, this guy is self-aware enough, has the social skills required to be an NFL coach, let me deal with this, they already know. Because they know the guy. Philadelphia hired Doug Peterson. They didn't know they didn't know Chip Kelly when they got rid of Andy Reid. They didn't know Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly lit a match in that organization. So they went out and hired Doug Peterson because they knew Doug Peterson. Sometimes when an owner hires a coach, it's because they see an offense on TV and they say, I want that offense. Well, the Titans tried I want Cincinnati's offense, assuming that Brian Callahan could turn Will Levis into Joe Burrow and do it without Jamar Chase. It didn't work. So now, when it comes to the Titans and the owners, do they say, hey, we want somebody we know. And we know Arthur, and we know Arthur's competent, and we know Arthur is a good offensive coach because when Arthur coached for us, he was a good offensive coach, and we want Arthur because, again, we know how this works. And we know that Arthur Smith can handle Cam Ward's development and that he's got the temperament to coach Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker's players. And again, I think a lot of Titan fans are out on Arthur, even though Arthur absolutely lit it up as the offensive coordinator here because of what happened in Atlanta. But again, Arthur's replacement is doing less with $100 million more at quarterback and the 8th overall pick at quarterback and not Desmond Ridder. And I think that has to be a check in favor of Arthur Smith. So I think it's still going to be Matt Nagy, but I do think you watch, Atlanta is a complete and total shit show. And they've got players on their team that I would love to have. I would love to have A.J. Terrell. I would love to have Drake London. I would love to have Bijan Robinson. Hell, I'd love to have the other running back. And they're terrible. They're worse than they were with Arthur. So I think we need to put Arthur on the list. He's always been on the list, but I want to know more about Atlanta because it looks like Atlanta keeps sucking without Arthur. So that's the second thing. And we'll get to your reaction on all of this. But we do have to get to our newest segment on the program. And this one I'm very excited about.
The Cam Ward excuse of the day.
Okay, let's get to the Cam Ward excuse of the day. So apparently Titans Twitter, every time Cam Ward stinks, which is every Sunday, Titans Twitter goes from arguing about whether or not Cam stinks to an all-out defense of why Cam Ward doesn't stink and why it's somebody or something else's fault. Brian Callahan took a brunt of the Cam Ward problems early in the season, and he probably deserves some of that. Now Mike McCoy and Bo Hardigree are taking the brunt of a lot of the Cam Ward struggles. That's a daily excuse. The state of the roster, Mason Kinsey running the right route. Well, now the new excuse for Cam Ward is the schedule. This schedule was so hard. Oh my God. Kaharski. The Titans might be 1-9, but their schedule is absurdly tougher than anyone else in the NFL. A breakdown of why the context matters for Cam Ward's development. Look, I told you guys when the schedule came out, I would not have started him right away. When the schedule came out, I would have said, hey, he's starting on the bench because I'm not going on the road to Denver in week 1 with a rookie quarterback and sticking him out there and saying, all right, Junior, good luck. New offensive line, a left tackle who had never played with the left guard before, a right tackle who had never played right tackle in the NFL before, a right guard who just showed up, and a starting center who was coming off of Achilles surgery. And they just stuck him out there. I said I would not have played him the first 2 weeks. Denver and the Rams. But after that, at some point, don't you kind of have to just accept that the schedule is what it is? The Titans played the Raiders, who fucking stink, and got the shit kicked out of them. The Titans almost got completely blasted by Arizona, except Arizona completely crapped the game away. And that's the one win that they got. I get it. Indianapolis is better than people expected. But that's because this offseason, they went out and got better. Houston has a good defense. That's because last offseason, Houston spent a lot of money on their defense. You don't. I am so tired of everybody. And in this case, it was Zach Lyons. And I like Zach Lyons, but in this case, it was Zach Lyons going out of his way to find some stats to say, see, look how good these defenses are. Okay. It's the NFL. And the fact is, Cam stinks against him. Now, I know Jackson Dart went out and dominated the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday Night Football, but I guess their DVOA isn't as high as some of the teams the Titans have played, so it's not fair. Yeah, okay, I'll still take the Eagles to beat the Colts if they were to play in the Super Bowl. To me, when I see people talking about how hard the schedule's been, I just look at it and I say, that is the excuse du jour. That is the
Cam Ward excuse of the day.
The Cam Ward excuse of the day. You know, we may have to go ahead and get that sponsored. I mean, in all seriousness, that might be one of my favorite ones. The Cam Ward excuse of the day. I mean, earlier in the week, the excuse was that Xavier Restrepo wasn't out there. And it actually looks like Xavier Restrepo might play this week. And that'll be good because when he does nothing, it'll shut everybody up for that Cam Ward excuse of the day. Let's get to some reaction before we get to the Thursday night sermon here if you want to weigh in on the program. Daniel says, include Garrett Wilson in the Jets trade back. The Jets aren't trading Garrett Wilson. I know the moron owner in Carolina traded away DJ Moore when he moved up to get his quarterback, but the Jets aren't that stupid. If you're going to draft a young quarterback, you want him to have a number one receiver. Garrett Wilson is a number one receiver in his prime. The Jets are not going to trade him that. They've got Rick Spielman there, and I know he's smart enough not to do that. And so Garrett Wilson ain't going anywhere. Like, I'm just going to tell you. You guys are going, well, let's get that. Again, the Matt Miller trade was the 4th pick, the 28th pick, and a second rounder next year for the number 1 pick. That is such a bad trade. If Matt Miller was my general manager and I owned the team and he walked in with that proposed trade, I would fire him. That sounds like the trade that Rand Carthon tried to orchestrate with Denver during the 2023 draft that apparently Mike Vrabel stepped in and said, we're not doing that. And I don't know what the specifics of the trade were, but apparently it was so bad. Rand was about to make a trade with Denver, and Vrabel said, no, we're not doing that. I am actually kind of fascinated to know what that trade might be. One person says, I say let Cam choose all the draft picks because he knows what the team needs to succeed. I did hear them ask Cam Ward yesterday what he's looking for when it comes to a head coach. And he was like, I want a head coach who's good on both sides of the ball, that focuses in on the run game. That I'm like, dude, just shut up. I'm like, what do you know about a head coach in the NFL? And the truth is, he was only answering what they asked him. But Cam Ward does not need to be a part of the process when it comes to hiring a head coach. Cam Ward needs to learn how to play quarterback. That's what he needs to be worried with. George in the Burrow says, I'd interview Chris Shula from the Rams. They won't hire him, but he'll be a head coach somewhere. Again, these defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, I don't know if they're any good or not. I didn't know Brian Callahan was a moron. I had to watch Brian Callahan coach the team and try PT out at right tackle and shrug off the position. And then 3 weeks into the season, stand there with his hat on his, holding his hat saying, I don't know what to do, for me to realize this guy's not very bright. I don't know if Chris Shula's bright or not. I don't know. Chris Shula, Jesse Minter, Joe Brady, I don't know. Those guys might be the next Andy Reid. They also might be the next Adam Gase. And that's why, again, oftentimes owners say, I'll hire the guy I know. Because Robert Kraft knew Mike Vrabel knew how to coach a team. Tampa Bay knew Todd Bowles knew how to coach a team. Supposedly, Jimmy Haslam said no thank you to Dan Campbell because Dan Campbell came in and was like, I think we need to run the ball. Jimmy Haslam was like, run the ball? Why would I do that? Because you have Nick Chubb, the best running back in the league other than Derrick Henry. And Baker's a second-year player. You want to bring him along slowly? No. They hired Freddie Kitchens. When it comes to Chris Shula, I don't know if Chris Shula is any good or not. That doesn't mean that he's bad. It's just, I don't know. And you want to run the risk of getting an endorsement from somebody you do know and trusting that endorsement and spending a day with the guy and then hiring him? Or do you want to go with someone that we know is competent enough to coach, again, like Arthur Smith? One person says, Jets, Cardinals, Browns, Falcons, Titans, Giants, Raiders are all interchangeable, horrible franchises. The NFL is a socialist government. They want everybody to be the same. They have a cap in which teams are supposed to manage salaries. The best team gets the worst pick. The worst team gets the easiest schedule. Everybody in the league is supposed to be 9-8 or 8-9. The problem is that it's about the same handful of teams that are at the bottom every year. The Giants, the Browns, the Raiders, the Jets, the Titans, the Jags, the same teams. Now, every now and then, one of those teams will have a good year, but then they go right back down. Remember, Jacksonville went to the AFC title game and probably should have won that title game if it wasn't for a bad call. And then they go right back. And for the most part, they're not good every year, but the Eagles are good pretty much 4 out of every 5 years with Jeffrey Lurie owning the team. From the Andy Reid era, they had the couple bad years with Chip Kelly, and then boom, right in the Super Bowl with Doug Peterson. Then they get rid of Doug Peterson, and then boom, right in the Super Bowl with Nick Sirianni. They get it. Unbelievable. Joe says Las Vegas sucks, and it took till garbage time before the Titans scored a touchdown. I saw the score was 20-10. I totally don't even remember what happened in that game, which might not be a good sign for me in my memory. But I don't even remember what happened in that game. I just remember that it was an ass kicking like all the other ass kickings. That it was just like, yeah, I mean, this team is getting their rear ends kicked. And they're getting their rear ends kicked by this terrible Raider team. Brady says, if Arthur Smith came from a dumb organization and didn't succeed, should he come to the Titans, who are just as bad, if not worse? So the Titans have to stop being dumb. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do that, but I am saying if you're going to have any hope of getting out of this, you have to stop being stupid at some point. For whatever that's worth. Okay. It is time. It is Thursday night. Again, the football week kicks off. Am I the only one who on like Tuesday and Wednesday, and maybe some of this is because the Predators stink so bad, but on Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm just like, oh, what is on TV? Like the baseball playoffs end. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm like, what is on TV? Now, we did watch the CMA Awards, or I watched CMA Awards last night. Congratulations to Lainey Wilson. They should just rename the CMA Awards the Lainey Wilson Invitational, because she just sweeps every year, and she did last night, and she, of course, is a proud artist of Broken Bow Records. And let me say this. I don't know Lainey. Lindsay works extensively with Lainey. When our Australian Shepherd got sick, Lindsay was in Calgary with Lainey, and Lindsay hit the red eye home through Seattle and came back, and we got to spend a weekend with Stevie before she passed away. And Lainey Wilson and her team, they could not have been more nice, more accommodating. Everything I've heard about Lainey Wilson from Lindsay, who, again, works extensively with her and her team, is that Lainey Wilson is one of the single nicest people on the planet. And so when I hear that and then I see her win all the awards she wins, I am very, very happy for her. Now, it is Thursday night, which means, oh, thank God we have football on TV. And it means it's time for the Thursday night sermon. Okay, number one, Bills Texans tonight. That actually feels like a pretty good Thursday night football game. Can somebody explain to me why the Texans aren't very good? Again, they're 5-5, but they're in third place. The Texans spend a boatload of money on their football team. They have a young, ascending quarterback who 2 years ago looked like the next great quarterback in the NFL. They have a stud number one wide receiver. They have two top edge rushers. They have one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. They have one of the better safeties in the NFL in Jalen Petrie. And yet, they're behind Jacksonville. They're behind Indianapolis. They're 5-5. Can somebody explain to me why? Why isn't Houston better? I mean, look at their team. Can I get a name then? Number two, JJ McCarthy in Minnesota came out and said he is rewiring his brain to learn how to play quarterback. We've heard that one before, haven't we? Question for JJ. What did you do last season under the great Kevin O'Connell when you were out for the year with a knee injury while you were watching Sam Darnold win 14 games? Was your brain perfectly wired then? Wouldn't that be the perfect time to rewire young JJ's brain? JJ out for the year with a knee injury. He's essentially redshirting. And if his brain needed rewiring to play the quarterback position, how could Kevin O'Connell let Sam Darnold at 28 years old, paying Justin Jefferson $35 million a year to be the best wide receiver in the NFL, how could they just let Sam Darnold walk out the door, again, knowing that their quarterback needed a lobotomy in order to be able to play QB? The whole Minnesota JJ thing doesn't make any sense. Here's what I'll say it sounds like to me. Minnesota overdrafted the quarterback because they fell in love with his personality. He's not good enough right now to play quarterback in the NFL, and the great Kevin O'Connell is trying to solve the mystery as to why. But the truth is, you had a franchise quarterback, and you let him go because you were so arrogant that you just thought you could rewire JJ's brain for him. As Dr. Phil would say, how's that working out for you? Can I get an amen? A couple of years ago, the NFL decided to use flex options for Monday Night Football. I remember John Mara, the owner of the Giants, absolutely got his panties in a wad over what about all the fans in the stadium, as if the 70,000 coming to watch an NFL game is somewhat comparable or should be considered to the millions watching on TV. So now that we can flex Monday Night Football and we can flex Sunday Night Football and we're trying to put the best matchups on television, can somebody explain to me why Kansas City and Indianapolis is a noon kick on CBS, but that we'll all get Carolina at San Francisco for Monday Night Football? I understand the point of flexing. There are matchups in May that look like they'll be a big deal that come November, December because of injuries or underperformances or for whatever reason aren't that big of a deal. But at what point did the schedule maker say, let's put Carolina on Monday Night Football? Again, I'll watch because I love the NFL. But I'd much rather watch Colts versus Chiefs. And they can put that as the standalone game on Monday Night Football. And again, we agreed to start flexing Monday Night Football for this reason. Nobody knew the Colts were going to be this good. Nobody knew that Kansas City's season was going to be on the brink, but it is. I'd like to watch the game. Can you put it on instead of Carolina? Granted, most of the country is getting Chiefs Colts. Not us, by the way. Most of the country is getting Chiefs Colts. But that's not better than the entire country getting Chiefs Colts on Monday Night Football. Joe and Troy calling the game. Instead, Joe and Troy will be calling Carolina. And finally, Shedeur Sanders gets his start in the late window on Sunday versus the Raiders. Lord, I hope something happens. I don't know what I'm rooting for when it comes to Shedeur Sanders' first career start against the Raiders. And I think a lot of people are going to watch this game via the Sunday ticket packages because Shedeur Sanders is a made-for-TV prospect. That said, I don't know if I want Shedeur to play well or Shedeur to play poorly. Because on one hand, if Shedeur Sanders plays well, ESPN will not shut up about how great Shedeur Sanders is if he actually plays well. I don't need to hear every single day about Shedeur Sanders. It's fine during the draft season when there's no good quarterbacks and the teams at the top of the draft aren't that interesting. To talk about Deion's kid every day, fine. But after that, I care about real football and real storylines and things that actually matter, and Shedeur Sanders does not. So if Shedeur plays well, it'll be a never-ending story. If Shedeur Sanders stinks, then all the Shedeur defenders led by Josina Anderson will come out of the woodwork to make excuse after excuse about the fact that a guy who went in the 5th round isn't really that good. So I can't decide what I am rooting for on Sunday in Shedeur Sanders' first start. But I can tell you this, I'd rather watch that than watch Dallas play Philly for the 280th time over the last 5 years in a prime viewing slot. That's it for us, everybody. Great show today. Really had great interaction. Again, I didn't crap on Cam as much as I have in the past. Who knows what that means? Great show today. Be sure to like and subscribe on the program as always. And I do want to point this out. George says that 1025 better grill Barry Trotz later. I put it out there today. They need to grill him because if I was doing the Barry Trotz interview, I would grill his ass. And I've texted Adam Vingan and told him, hey, man, you're going to need to grill that ass today. So who knows? At this point, I've lost all confidence in Barry Trotz. I mean, I have rolled with some of the things I didn't agree with and said, well, maybe let's see. But he's keeping this coach who sucks. And it's like, he may be a great coach. It's just not working out. He can't see that. His pride's too big. I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's incompetent or his pride's too big or whatever, but they need to change the coach and they won't. So with that, we trudge along for another hockey season. That's it for us. Everybody enjoy Thursday Night Football tonight, and we will see everybody live tomorrow at 2:00.